serves as an unbiased element, which can then disseminate results and data that may not be publishable from different industry partners. NASA is already in the process of testing several highly automated functions, such as detect and avoid type functions, flight path management type functions, and assured geofencing type functions. Affordable advanced air mobility has the potential to connect rural and urban areas, allowing for access to services like medical couriering or medical evacuation in the advent of enormous traffic jams caused by an accident, or even in the case of disaster management where a flood washes out a rural road. For AAM operations in vehicles, safety is the #1 priority. If these systems aren't safe, no one's going to want to use them or want them flying overhead. This is why NASA's research is dedicated to making sure that the public gets the safety that it wants.
Advanced air mobility, or AAM, is this vision of a new mode of transportation that will enable the safe and efficient movement of people and cargo by air to and from locations that are currently only accessed by road. One area the NASA team is researching is passenger ride quality. NASA's Advanced Air Mobility mission is researching what ride quality could be like for passengers traveling in eVTOL aircraft to make sure it'll be a smooth and safe ride. The idea is to conduct research on human subjects by studying their physiological response to the types of low-frequency motion, vibration, and noise stimuli that we expect AAM passengers will experience. We believe AAM aircraft will need to be designed smartly. They will need to be conducive to low cabin noise and low vibration from the rotors. They will need to be more resistant to being upset by turbulence. And they will need to be operated or flown in a predictable, repeatable, non-aggressive manner that will not result in large accelerations or sudden accelerations or rotations of the aircraft. It's really exciting to see the amount of innovation that is going on in the aerospace industry. It is truly a fascinating experience to see all these new designs come forth.
Our center here, in case you didn't already know, is named NASA Armstrong, Neil A. Armstrong. Neil was a test pilot here, actually, from the late 1950s into the early 1960s. Neil had these old English sports cars. They were called MGs, MGA, and they were very unreliable. And Neil had 4 of them. And he lived on a hill in the south end of Palmdale, and Neil would go out in the morning and he would jump into one of the MGs and he would roll down the hill. And when he got to the bottom of the hill, he would put the car in second gear and let the clutch out and see if the car would start. And if the car started, then he would drive off to work. If the car didn't start, then he would continue rolling down the bottom of the hill. He would put it back into neutral, and then there was a gas station at the bottom of the hill with a garage. And he would roll in there, and he would take the keys and he would throw them under the mat. And then he would walk back up the hill and get into his second MG, and he would repeat this. There were days when all 4 of the MGs would be parked in front of the garage there, and Milt or Bill Dana would have to drive down and pick Neil up to give him a ride to work. Milt loved to tell this story about Neil and his unreliable cars. All the way through the Apollo program, I understood that Neil drove rather, I would say, pedestrian sort of vehicles. He was not one of the guys that would run around in a Corvette or anything like that. That was not Neil's style. He flew a variety of aircraft, the F-4D Skyray, the F-5D Skyray. He ended up flying the X-15. He had a very famous story that happened on the X-15. He ended up pulling out a little bit too soon and the X-15 skipped back out of the atmosphere. He ended up overflying Pasadena before he got it turned around. He ended up just barely making all the way back to Edwards and landing on the lake bed. He was a very experienced test pilot. He was very calm, even when things were not necessarily going his way. This would actually play out several times after he was selected as an astronaut. He had an incident that happened about a year before he landed on the moon. He was flying the LLTV, actually, one of the trainer vehicles, down at Johnson. The gyroscope that was the feedback inside to keep the vehicle stabilized failed. And as a result of that, the vehicle started tilting over, and he was perhaps 300 feet off the ground. And he was about a second and a half from the point where it probably would have been a fatal accident, and he ejected. Neil was very, very calm under pressure. During the actual moon landing, if you go back and listen to the tape replay of that, they are down to about 20 seconds of fuel. You have to imagine an entire Saturn V, about 6.5 million pounds, 7.5 million pounds of thrust when it lifts off the pad. They have all this rocket, all this hardware, all this fuel. They go 250,000 miles in space to the moon, and they arrive at the